Hello and welcome. My name is Petra Mayer and I'm the CEO and founder of Petra Mayer and Associates Consulting. And in today's interviews, I'm super excited to have with me Isobel Wallace. She is the general manager of Thinking Cap, one of the learning management systems in the market. And if you are in the market for LMS, then you might really want to listen to this interview to learn more about Thinking Cap and if Thinking Cap is for you. Isobel, welcome to my interview series.
Thank you. Hello.
I am really glad that you're here because, as you know, I'm doing this piece, a content piece, on really defining a little bit more for listeners what the market situation is for learning management system. So before we go into really identifying Thinking Cap more in more detail, how would you characterize the market of learning management systems?
It's a large market, I will say. There are definitely a very large number of LMS systems out there. And I think a lot of LMS systems with the core functionality that is pretty much the same, to be perfectly honest. There are some systems that are very regimented and you can only do this thing. And I think that is probably the largest pool of LMS systems out there. And then there are a few on the around sort of the edges of that where you can highly customize them. So I think from an LMS perspective, it's really identifying which ones are extremely rigid. You can only put in a course and track it and see them to complete, or ones that allow you to offer more complicated program requirements, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're already speaking to kind of these different systems that I find are sitting in different pools or different levels, you might say. So, what do you think are common misconceptions about learning management systems?
Um, I think people, when they come to these systems, they think that everyone is very different from the one that they've seen before. But I think if you look under the hood, a lot of it is defined by the fact that we all have to be SCORM compliant. So the under the hood is largely the same. We all have activities. We are all SCORM compliant. They all roll them up into things like learning paths or curriculum paths. Everyone has a different name for them. They're all pretty much the same thing. I think generally that core competency of most LMSs is not understood to be pretty much the same across all of them. It's where you get into how they support credits and re-enrollments and items like that where things really start to differ. But I think that there are a lot of core competencies that most LMSs have, and it's how you need to deliver it, and if there are any of the sort of bells and whistles that you need that go beyond that, really where you need to identify the differences.
Mm-hmm. So, I think what I'm hearing you say is if you're looking for an LMS, you need to really look deep under the hood to find out what a specific LMS delivers, how they deliver on it, and you need to match it back to what you need in your business in order to select the LMS that provides you with the functionality you need, but doesn't necessarily charge you for functionality that you don't need.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I know the pricing models across all these LMSs are so different that you're usually trying to compare apples to oranges, and maybe that's that doesn't help at all. But simplicity, I think, is easier if you start with what do I need beyond just delivering the course, and then start the point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now a lot of things have changed over the last few years, particularly since COVID. We've had so many changes in organizations. How did those changes, if at all, impact the trends in learning, in online learning or in learning overall, and with that impact the choice of the system?
I will say in the last little while, we've had a lot more interest in gamification. It's really just trying to keep interest into the training modules and trying to keep people engaged and employee retention. So, everyone has to do that compliance training course once a year or once every other year. It's like, how do you make them want to do it? So I am seeing a lot of gamification elements in there. I'm also seeing a lot more use of webinars over face-to-face. Obviously, that came up a lot during, but how they're using those in their programs is changing a little bit. So it's breaking up what they would normally have done in a face-to-face with some slightly more interesting modules, and then a webinar session afterwards to just really highlight the bits that people may have got stuck on. You know what I mean? So it's sort of splitting that up a little bit. We're seeing a bit more of that. But I think that the gamification one, we're seeing a lot more of that when it comes to where they're making decisions about their LMS. So even if they're not ready to jump on that bandwagon and get into it, we're seeing a lot more questions around, can you support learning points? Can you support badges? And that approach, which I like and I get excited about because it means that they're thinking about how to improve the way they're delivering their programs, which I always find fun.
Yeah, I think 2 years ago, the big questions that came to me were, we're delivering everything in person and now we can't do that anymore. How do we quickly switch over? What do we do? And I think, they made that jump into online. And as you just said, I think it's their big pain point is they found out, wow, we can actually deliver learning cheaper by not flying people all over the country and putting them all in the same room and into hotels and all that. We can, and safer because we don't have them all in the same room either. But now the question is, well, how do we make our content stick? So we've given them content and they've gone through what they have to do, but did that really stick? And how do we get them engaging? So the gamification, I can totally see that there is more desire in that. And I think also what you were mentioning here with the webinars, because gosh, if we think back 4 years ago, we were inundated with all these webinar invitations. And people would go because it was exciting and new. And then they wouldn't go anymore because it was boring and they really didn't take as much away. But these interactive sessions are still so important when we want to deepen the learning and we want people to have somebody to troubleshoot with and go through case studies and ask questions.
It's almost like taking that flipped classroom method approach to it, where you really are using the e-learning modules for what they're best at and using those face-to-face, whether it's, actually in person or online, where start using those for what they're good for, which is the direct engagement, being able to ask a question and get an answer. And so I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about Thinking Cap then. How does Thinking Cap match these new demands in the market that we have with gamification, with badges, points, and also interactive live sessions?
So we support all of those.
Good.
Well, mostly because, you get a request from a client and you start investigating, that sounds amazing. And we did that years ago and started really just evolving it. So we have a lot of features around managing webinar sessions and recurring sessions so that they're easier to schedule, integrations with, all the webinar providers, which of course all changed during COVID. So you had to redo them all. Yeah, we've all been there. But so all of the needs for how you manage your webinars and how you get those out to your learners, our LMS is really good for that. It's also, and maybe we can delve into it a little bit more later, but it's all about how you match your users to those activities. And then afterwards, how you reward them for completing it. So sometimes the rewards can entice people in. Sometimes the rewards are necessary rewards they have to get because, you want to stay certified in something. So all of those features are a big part of what we do. And mostly because our focus here is getting down to what your actual program training requirements are. What are the objectives? What are you trying to get out of this training? Why are you buying an LMS to begin with, right? And then from that information, identifying, well, because of that, then we know that in order to make sure that it's good, we need to have these reports. We also therefore know that in order to make sure that that improves, we need to add all of these elements in. And that's sort of the approach we take with every new client that comes on. And I think that's the best way to look at it from any onboarding process. But our LMS is pretty customizable in that you can use as little or as much of it as you need, depending on what your requirements are. And I think that's sort of one of our biggest benefits.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear is that you seem to be very, how shall I even say that? You seem to really tap into what your client's needs are and support the client in satisfying these needs with what you've got off the shelf, but also be open to thinking about, we haven't got that yet, so maybe we need to, because there is a good valid demand for that. Is that right? Do I hear that correctly?
That is definitely right. And I would also say that we have an event once a year that we call Thinking Camp, where we invite especially our customers that really use the software in the most, complex ways, they come and join us and all of our staff, and we sit down and we build the roadmap for the next year together. So it's this is what we did this year. Did this work? Did it not work? What's the best way to approach this? What could we be doing something more efficiently? And we look at everything, every request. We have clients that come with lists like, I really want to get into doing this this year, and I'm looking at the features and how would you do that? And is there anything that could make that easier for us? And it's not just the clients coming with these ideas. We have our developers, our QA, our project manager, support, our management. We're all in the same room and we're all looking at how best to achieve that. So yeah, our clients really do drive our roadmap and what our features are.
I really like that, because I think that you are growing with the needs of the market. So, we've seen so many changes over the last few years. Obviously, before there was huge changes, even getting learning online, but now the changes are so swift that you are willing to change with the market and take the lead also from your clients. I love that. So when we're thinking about an organization who wants to implement online learning or wants to switch from a learning system that they're not happy with, what do they need to keep in mind before signing up with any system?
So I definitely would love, when you're writing any learning course, you always start off with your learning objectives. I think when you're looking at switching from one LMS to another, or even starting with your first LMS, it's really, what are your program objectives? What are the requirements for what it is you have to deliver? So if you're looking at setting up a new or moving over an already existing certification program, for example, then you know that your requirements are that the people who are your members have to do the specific training, and they have to get a certain number of credits in these areas over this time frame. Knowing that information, and even if you know it off by heart, just writing it down and documenting it, even if you were to provide that to the LMS salesperson, they would be able to say, well, yeah, we can do this, and not this. Or we can do this, and this. If you thought about doing that thing this way, you can get a lot more conversational, which I think during the sales process is a lot more useful, right? Being able to have the conversations about, well, have you ever implemented anything like that before? How did they implement it? Do you have examples of that? Those are the things I think are the most useful get started approaches, but really knowing and having a good understanding of what the requirements are before you start, what those objectives are, I think are where I would start, definitely.
Yeah, you definitely speak my language in an area that I'm so passionate about. I often have clients come to me and they said, oh, I've just signed up with the system. Now, how can we make this work? And they haven't even thought about what their training looks like. I also find more and more clients who have so many different use cases. I mean, you were mentioning certification, so you might have some compliance systems. You have new client onboarding. You might want to use the system for externals like your clients. Or maybe distribution partners, and they all have different needs. And sometimes I think clients are putting them all in the same, and they're striking them with the same brush as if they had the same needs. And I find it so important to really go down by audience and define the needs by audience, and then prioritize. Do you see something like that when clients come to you?
Definitely. We get a lot of people who don't think about the fact that they could be delivering different parts of their training to different audiences in a different way. So we always look at breaking down their training audience and building a learner journey for that audience. Because within our LMS, we allow you to set up branches. So you could be delivering a compliance program as well as an employee onboarding, as well as an external vendor training, as well as, right? So you could be doing all of those things at once, but how you deliver those and who you're delivering it to are extremely different. And sometimes there are security things, like some security requirements where the things you're delivering to your employee onboard should never get out beyond that area. So having that consideration and having that understanding about how to manage the training and how you would set it up is definitely very key. But from a learned journey perspective, I always focus on audience by audience. And a lot of the time that helps flesh out some of the details about what those requirements are that maybe the client may not have thought of, or they know, but they just never thought about how to communicate that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what would you say, who is the ideal user for Thinking Cap?
My ideal user is always someone who comes with an excitement about their program. Someone who, I mean, it could be the most boring. I've got to teach someone how to, you know, I don't know, I can't even think of the most boring subject ever, but it could be whatever that horribly boring subject is. As long as you have a passion for it and you want to make that program better, like I want to make sure that they have higher scores, that they or they sign up for more, they self-discover more content, or whatever that thing is that they're excited about. Those are my favorites. But the ideal user is someone who has a requirement to do something out there that is, every project's different, every project's interesting. And the problem is all of our clients are different, because a lot of our clients have such varying different needs, even though they follow similar patterns. The exciting thing about every one of our clients is that they all do it in a different way. Mm-hmm. So it's not, we don't really have like a standard client base. Like we have some programs where there's one LMS admin, they're doing it part-time and they're enrolling hundreds of thousands of people. Or we have some clients where they've got, you know, a whole team of LMS people who are building all these new courses. And you know, that's just because they have to deliver a whole bunch of content to their audience. So our audience for like our clients are very, very different. And I kind of like that.
Well, what I'm hearing here is I think you're looking for clients who are looking for custom solutions and are looking for somebody to help them to really achieve the best they can with a custom solution that can be adapting to their internal needs, versus you have a system that's off the shelf and you just plug into it.
Yeah, and you know, honestly, I think I know it sounds like I'm saying that, but I think that the more you actually look at your own program, the more you need to go beyond the, you know, the off the shelf, it can only do this thing. Because if you ever are trying to train, like anytime, if you're trying to teach a kid something, how you teach this kid versus another kid, that same thing is going to be different. And the more that you figure out your program and the more you know about the program, the more you're going to see that off the shelf box thing is different. So I guess my ideal client is someone who recognizes that any training program need isn't exactly the same as the next one. And therefore those systems are never going to work because they are exactly the same as the other system, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, that's, I think, my ideal client.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at perhaps some of the demographics of your clients. Would you say that Thinking Cap is for a certain size of company or a certain industry?
That would also not be an easy question to answer. We have small businesses that use our system for a small number of users happily, because it's you know, that it does the thing it needs them to do, and once they're set up, it automates and it does that. And usually that's when you have a part-time person who's trying to manage something. But then we also have clients, like Amazon's one of our clients, and that couldn't be more opposite in that they have millions of users and they're trying to train on a complete variety of different things, and each team is delivering completely different training. So it really does vary for us. They kind of fall into a few buckets, I guess, if that helps. We have a lot of people doing employee training. We also have a number of clients that are doing like associations that are doing running some sort of certification program, and a lot of people doing upskilling. So whether it's just trying to get people to come in and improve their skills, a lot of self-discovery, a lot of enticing people to come and learn more. Those are sort of the buckets that we do, but it's also a gray area because some of those span multiples. So it's interesting. Yeah, but
and no, sorry, Isobel.
Oh, I was just going to say, but I wouldn't say that we're good at any one of those, like better at any one of those areas, because I think it really depends on how you use the system. It can handle a small number of users really easily. It can also handle millions of users really easily. So,
awesome. Okay. And so where do you think are the features where Thinking Cap excels and is perhaps best of class?
We always look at trying to set up a system that manages itself as much as possible. And we use that using what we call rule sets. So you can define, I always need this course to run and re-enroll people every 2 years that match these rules, and because these are the regulations of who needs to take this course, right? And it will just complete running, and it'll automatically send the notifications. It'll automatically do the enrollment. It'll automatically pull people if they no longer match those requirements anymore. So for us, it's, and for our clients, it's that you can do a lot with the system without having to touch it on a day-to-day basis. It just automatically runs. And that is, that touches so many different areas within the LMS, from enrollment, from how these users move from branch to branch, even if they need to. But every aspect of the LMS, we try to automate it as much as possible with logic that you get to decide how you need to set up that logic, what that requirement is.
Mm-hmm. And then I always know that when there is a lot of logic involved, or rules involved, or permissions involved, it obviously needs a bit more thinking on the side of the administration and the setup initially. Yep. So what does a typical implementation for Thinking Cap look like?
So the very first part is our onboarding team will meet with you, and we set, so our objective for our onboarding team is that we set it up for you. And while we're setting it up, we're asking all the questions we need to ask. We're collecting all the data, all the content that we need to along the way, while you're also going through some training on the LMS, so that by the time you're ready to launch, you know how to use the LMS and everything is set up for you. And that is really the objective of our onboarding program. Mm-hmm. And as we onboard, obviously, we're looking at how it needs to be set up, why it needs to be set up that way, and our clients see it evolve. So, you know, the first day of the first meeting, they log into the LMS, they have a user account, they're in there. There's nothing there yet. The second time we meet with them, we start seeing some of their branding approach. We start seeing some of their activities loading in. So they see it evolve in a very agile approach to the setup. So they see everything evolve. So they have a chance to say, you know what, we don't want to set it up that way anymore. We want to set up this way now that we see this over here, right? Mm-hmm. So knowing that also what you think you want out of a system at the very beginning and what you want at the end of that project aren't always going to be the same. It gives them a bit of a chance during that process to change their minds as well. But the objective is always, when you're ready to launch that program in our system, that's when we're going to hand you the key. Well, you'll have the keys all along, but that's when we allow you to take over the day-to-day management of it. And by that point, you'll know how the system works and how to do all of that.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting how you're describing it. Obviously, I've been through a number of learning management system implementation projects, and they're all different depending on how the LMS wants to run an implementation, and also how the client can mm-hmm. devote time and resource and effort to it. This sounds, it sounds very agile. It sounds very collaborative, how you're describing it. It's a collaborative effort to come up with the best possible system for the needs of that particular client.
Definitely. And we actually wrote a book on Agile project management methodologies years ago. So we are all in on the Agile approach to any project, whether it's development or even just implementation, because you have to be able to accommodate, and I don't want to have to give you change order after change order on stuff. I just want to know there's flexibility. So if a client is thinking they want to set up this credit program, and then halfway through they get approved for a new regulatory agency to auto report, we're going to include that, because we now know you can do that, and it's just a matter of setting up that integration, and it's part of the onboarding. So we definitely make sure that that during that process there is give and take. Like there has to be the communication through it to make sure that A, you understand what you're asking us to do, and B, then once we've done it, you understand what it is we did. So we definitely are big on communication during that process.
Mm-hmm. And so what happens after that? So, you know, the system is set up, and you were saying, you know, we go into a project like this with one vision, and then we come out and have a very different vision, and things had to change along the way. You've handed mm-hmm. over the key. Now the administrator is the primary person. What happens mm-hmm. when other changes happen along the way later on, or they struggle with something? There's a team change on client side, and the new team coming in didn't get the benefits of being part of the onboarding process. How do you support your client then?
So the onboarding team is always available if a question comes up, and we do answer questions. But we usually do what we call a handover, where we walk our support team through what it was we set up and why we set it up that way. They have access to meeting recordings, so they can see what that conversation was if they need to for context. But we usually we document a lot of what we do and why we do it, and we use the same system to track all of that work that our support team are in, so that they can always go back and review and say, why would the, oh, I can see from that thread, that's why that domain or that URL was used here. So that we are completely open with our internal team on how things are set up and why they are set up that way. But we do handover meetings. So our support people will then take over, and the person that manages that team will be checking in regularly to make sure that you have what you need. And technically that person is also in charge of training, so they already know who you are anyway, and the trainer has given them feedback on questions that come up, because we talk to the training team as well. A lot of communication internally, so we talk to the training team when they say, I just did this session, they were asking a lot of questions about this. Or we'll say, when you do that training session on this, make sure you include a lot, like do a deeper dive into this area, because they're going to be using it a lot. So there is a lot of communication throughout that process. But we have, because we're Agile, we meet as a team every day. So our support team can say, I was just talking to this client and they were asking about this, and anyone who's worked on it for any part of it will be able to say, oh, they're asking about that because of this, and you can add context if need be. So yeah, we're big in communication from that perspective.
So something that is probably so natural for you, and you don't even think about talking about it, and is so important. You have a support team that somebody can speak to. This doesn't happen for every LMS. We should be aware of that. There is LMSs where, well, maybe you can submit a ticket, but you will never get anybody on the phone. So having somebody that you can talk to, who can then internally talk to somebody who actually was on the setup team, is huge, and really something that I recommend that you stand out as somebody who has that, and has that support once the system has been handed over. A lot of clients struggle later.
And I find that I have to remind clients, you can call, you can log a ticket. If you are in the moment and you just need to answer that question, it's okay to pick up the phone and call support. They will answer, and they will be able to give you the answer right then and there. You don't have to log a ticket if you're sometimes you log the ticket because you just want to know, but we also have rules about how fast that we get back to our clients. So if you log a ticket within hours, you're going to get a response anyway. But yeah, if you're just in there, pick up the phone. It surprises me, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but it does surprise me that I have to sometimes remind people it's okay to call our support people,
Well, in how many industries can we still do that? I think that is special for you. So it's a big selling point, I think, because clients taking over a system and knowing that there is such a shift over in HR and their team members, people who have been there for implementing the team are often not there anymore a year later, and new people coming in, and they don't have that knowledge, because clients aren't that good in documentation of everything that they did and why they did it and how it's being done. So I think that's a big selling factor for you. So let's talk a little bit about pricing model. You said earlier there is such a great variety of pricing models for learning management systems. So how do you price for your clients?
For us, it's based on active users. So if you have a seat, for us is a user that's in the system that is an active user, just trying to keep it as simple as possible. You can, and we do recommend, if your user is no longer there, so say, for example, an employee that left, just deactivate the account. You don't have to lose their data. We don't charge you for that data in any way, shape, or form. Just if you have an active employee and you need them to learn, get them into our system, and that is the only thing that we charge for. They could take 1 million courses in there, it's still the same fee.
And do you have a minimum number of users, active users, that you charge for?
We have, I think 500 right now is maybe the minimum. But our support people our salespeople will be able to walk you through what the different levels are. And if need be, they can help put together a custom quote if you need a custom quote as well.
So it's an annual fee basically, and no setup fee.
No setup fee, because we don't want anyone to say no to the onboarding, to be perfectly honest. Because I think that if I don't want to set a client up to fail, and I feel like charging an onboarding fee that someone might say no to might be setting them up to fail in a way, because you're not giving them, you're going to train them, and then it's everyone's had that situation where you walk into a system you know nothing about. Even with some training, it's still about, I don't know how to start. Where do I start? So yeah, we include that. We include that as almost like our lost leader in a way, because I'd much rather someone go through the onboarding and fully understand the system and be set up for a successful program, than not and get disheartened. So yeah,
Yeah.
for me,
Awesome.
that's my
Good. And what are pros and cons when we're looking at customization? You were, I think almost like I want to use the term personalization for your company. From what I'm hearing here, you're really personalizing it to the persona of the client company, of their objectives, their very individual needs. So I think that's different to customization. But I also know that clients go through kind of customizations when they are setting things up. What are the pros and cons for customization that a client needs to consider?
Well, for us, any customization that someone asks for, generally we review it and we confirm that it's something that we think is a really valuable addition to the LMS. But once that's in there, it is now a feature that becomes available to all of our customers. So from a pro perspective, because we allow this, it means that, an example, years ago, we had a client who asked us to set up an integration with Zendesk. And then the next year at our thinking camp session, we found out that another client saw that and started using and went with Zendesk because that integration was there. So one of the pros is that even if you don't pay for it, someone else might pay for that customization, in which case that's great and you get the benefit of that. I do push back when someone is asking for a customization and there's no reason for it. It just is a shiny toy. So we do try to make sure that there is a reason for it, and try to make sure that there is a purpose for it. We're not going to add something just because someone thinks it's a cool idea and there's no objective for their training that this would meet that requirement for. So we do push back maybe a little bit on that, but I think from a con perspective, because it becomes part of the whole LMS, I don't know if there really is a con, because as soon as it's part of the LMS, it gets added to all our automated tests, it gets added to the documentation, it becomes as if it's a feature within the LMS. So we don't treat it like a separate add-on that we've made for you and then it could rot over time. We don't do that.
Awesome. Now, in closing, what is one thing that you wish all clients knew before they come to you?
I think it's really what they're looking to get out of the LMS. And I know that sounds really basic. I mean, if they're looking to do some advanced stuff with SCORM, just let me know what advanced stuff with SCORM you want to do, and we'll have a fantastic conversation about it. Don't get me started on SCORM. I love SCORM. But there are, I think honestly, just to understand and be able to communicate what it is that they are looking for, what their objectives are, is really all I need. And that's what I need, because I feel like my job is to make sure that you understand how we will be able to deliver that.
It's funny that you say it sounds so basic, and I often have clients when I start on the working journey with them. That's obviously what I need to figure out. What is it that you need? What is it that you want? Is what you want really something that you're willing to pay for? It is such a big question. And I just had a session yesterday with a new client, and we're looking at, they came for an LMS. I'm not sure they need an LMS, but it's just really figuring out what they need and going through this session. And at the end, they said, wow, we're clearer now because of the questions you've asked of what it is that you need. It seems basic, but it is not easy. And so that's a discovery that I think every client has to go through before they start with the system.
A lot of clients, when we're going through the onboarding process, they think they know what it is they want, and they have these requirements. And then as you start delving into the setup of that and meeting that requirement, have you ever thought about this thing? And then you have that great conversation that sparks this, oh, it'd be great if we were to do that. And then sometimes it becomes in addition to what they were originally looking for. Those are fun. I like those meetings too. Because yeah, you're adding to the program, you're adding more benefit and value add to the program, but it's also sometimes you just, until someone asks that question, you don't know. You're right. That is actually a requirement for what we need to do. So yeah, the discovery part can be fun.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Isobel, I'm so glad that I had you on for this interview. It's very inspiring. I love to learn more about Thinking Cap. This was really interesting for me to learn more about how you approach uh, any client projects. I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you very much. It was wonderful.